All right, good morning, everybody. We're going to go ahead and start. I want to thank everybody for joining today. My name is Jennifer Morse. I'm the Director of Product Evangelism here at MadCap Software, and I'm so excited to be joined by my colleague and my teammate, Jorgeo Catolico, Sales Engineer here at MadCap Software. Today's webinar is all about the new features that we've introduced in 2019. Quick item of business before we jump in, since we have so much to cover today. As always, this webinar will be recorded. Now, it's going to be a little bit longer. We've sort of allocated some more time, more than the hour. So if you have to pop out early, that's fine. We're going to send a link to everybody so that you'll have this to review later on. There's also a questions panel in the GoToWebinar console. We would encourage all of you, if you have questions as we're going along, please use that area to drop in a question. We'll do our best to get to them at the end of the presentation. Whatever we don't get to live, we're going to be sending out a question and answer document too. So not to worry if your question doesn't get asked. We'll do our best to get back to you as quickly as possible, but do encourage you to use that for questions. So as I mentioned, this webinar is all about the new features that we've introduced this year. So just a quick agenda. Again, we've been a little busy over here at MadCap this past year. Lots of fun things that we've introduced. So we're going to be covering all of these major features that we introduced in the 2019 release earlier in the year. And then just last month, probably the first or second week of October, we released 2019 R2 and came out with some more major features. So our focus today is reviewing these major features in Flare and some shared features between Flare and Central, what they are, some of the mechanics, and what they mean for you as content developers. So with that, again, so much to cover today. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Gio, who's going to begin.
Thank you, Jen. So one of the first things you will notice when you launch Flare is an update to the Flare user interface. The start page has been redesigned, making it even easier to use and access your projects. You can quickly open your recent projects here in this list and throw a pin on your favorite project so that they'll appear at the top. Now, as our list of recent projects grow, our pinned projects will stay over at the top so we know where to find them. We also have a filter so you can go ahead and search for your projects that you're working on as well. On the right, we do have quick links that lets you open an existing project, create a new project, and if you have any questions, there is a direct link to our Flare online help found here. There's also a news and updates section at the bottom of the start page to keep our users informed about what's going on in the MadCap world. You may have noticed that we did make updates to our themes. We made updates to the black theme, the silver, and the classic themes, and we gave these a more modern and flat design, and some with new colors. Now in Flare, these can all be found by going into File, Options, and under the options, there's going to be an interface tab. And in this dropdown, you could go ahead and toggle and choose between these themes. So we have the black theme. We have the classic theme. And of course, the silver. Now, everybody has those different themes that they like, but feel free to try all three of these out and find the one that works for you and the one that you like. We also made updates to our factory templates that are provided with Flare. These will give you a nice head start and can be a great foundation when you start your project. We streamlined the library and organized them to 3 categories, which are online, and print. And we added some new styles, new skins, new images, and modernized these templates a little bit. Now, these are just templates, so they will come with placeholder topics and some layouts and skins that are already predefined. You can add, remove, or change anything that you want from these templates. You can create different projects from these templates and import files that you like from one template into another. We fully expect these templates to be used as a getting started point, and for our users to change the elements to fit the branding requirements. In these project templates, it also includes updates to the style sheets. And one of those updates is to include CSS variables, which makes it easy to update these brand colors and other elements, which is actually what I would like to talk about next. So along the lines of style sheets and styles, a major feature that we introduced with this release is support for CSS variables. Now, CSS variables isn't anything that MadCap invented. They are a CSS specification. And what's cool is we now support them in the editor. And we developed an easy way to create, apply, and edit them in the CSS editor. So in Flare, text variables have always been available, where we have a placeholder for a short string of text. So useful and handy when it comes to single source publishing. Well, now we use CSS variables, which we can use with our styles to enhance the single sourcing workflow even more. So I just wanted to go over a few things about CSS variables, and then I want to switch into Flare to show where we can create them, apply and edit them, and see what kind of effect they have. So why are these things cool? Well, a CSS variable lets you place the value of a style in one place and reuse it on as many elements as you want throughout a style sheet. And using them can save a lot of time, especially when it comes time to updating your styles. Much like our text variables, whenever you want to change the value, you only need to do so in one place, and the new value is propagated everywhere that the variable is referenced. You may be thinking, okay, well, I could change my font color for my heading 1s and heading 2s in my CSS. But what if you use that same dark gray color on your heading 1s and heading 2s, and also around a border color around a note, or a bottom border color under a dropdown? So you go into your style sheet and set that gray color on those elements. And then marketing comes along and says, hey team, we're going through a bit of a brand refresh. Yay for us. And they want you to go through a change from that dark gray to a slightly different dark gray to support the new corporate branding guidelines. So you go into all those elements into your CSS where you apply that dark gray color and you change it. Well, not if we use a CSS variable. We can update that color value in one place, and that change propagates everywhere it's used. Find and replace could yield inconsistent results. What if someone didn't use that hex value for that gray color that you need to use, and instead just typed in gray or a different hex value that looked pretty close to that gray that we're actually supposed to use? So I know this could sound a little silly, but it happens. So find and replace could get a little tricky because it can miss some spots. But using a CSS variable for that dark gray color can be so helpful here, because you don't need to worry about inconsistencies in your CSS or all the individual elements where you set that color. You could redefine that gray color for that variable, and the color will update everywhere that it's used. Now, I'm just using color as an example here because colors can be written in different ways and often set in your style sheet on individual elements. So remember, you may have font colors, border colors, background colors. So when we just say color here, we're not just limited to using it specifically for font colors. Also, you're not limited to just the color. You can use variables for many kinds of properties like sizes or fonts, so they can really be flexible to use. Now, you can quickly spot these variables in your style sheet. They are a property that starts with 2 dashes. And also, one thing to point out is that you can use whatever name you want for the variable. You are not limited to just the CSS property names like color or width or font family. As an example, you may have a color, say like a brand color that you may want to use for some of your headings. And maybe you also may want to use that same color for visible borders around certain notes or warnings. So your variable names can be descriptive. So when you insert these variables, it will look like this in your style sheet. Now here is just a simple H1 example with that brand variable used for the color here. So let's go ahead and head into Flare to show how we're going to set this up. I'll head into my style sheet, and one of the first things that you want to do is that we're going to want to make sure that we're in the advanced view. Now we can toggle between the advanced and simplified, but let's go ahead and make sure that we're in the advanced. Now here we have our variable selector, so let's expand it and let's select root. And we have a few variables in this project already for some colors, like our dark gray color, our light gray color, and our medium gray color. Now I wanted to show how easy it is to create, and then we're going to apply and then make an edit to that variable. So we'll get to this add new CSS variable dialog here. And the first thing that we're going to select is the element. Now, there's no right or wrong answer for what we should have here, but most people will leave this on root because that leaves this variable to be available to use across the whole style sheet. Now, you can create a variable just to use on specific elements like H1s or P tags, but that narrows things down and channels it for just one element. So using it at the root level is probably the best practice here. And then we'll give it a name. So let's say I have a certain brand color that I want to use in different places. So we're going to use this in our headings or borders. So I'll go ahead and leave this as brand. Next, we're going to want to give it a property type. Now, color is probably the most important property type for CSS variables, but just know that we chose the 4 most common ones that people will use to display here. Now, you can select custom, which is fine, but we made it easy and pre-populated this with the 4 most popular ones. And then next is we're going to select the value. So we can insert our hex value into this field here, but this cool color picker actually lets us select the color that's on our screen. So I'll go over to this blue that's right here because I know that this is part of our brand, and then I'll select it. And then in this window here, it writes in the resulting CSS for us so that we don't know how to do this in a text editor. Surely you can do this in a text editor if you're comfortable with using CSS like that, of course, but we have this here to make it easy within the interface, and it writes it out for us, which is cool and saves us some time. So I'll select OK. And then now we have our variable that we just created in our variables list, which was super easy to create. Now let's go ahead and apply our variable. So I'll head down into my H1, and then I'll go into the font property, which is currently set to inherit. Now, if I want to apply a CSS variable here, I could right click, and then I could select Insert CSS Variable, which is a new option for Flare 2019 and above. And then I'll select my brand variable from my list of variables here. I'll select OK. And then I'll also apply this for my heading 1s, heading 2s, and heading 3s. So now it's in a few places. Now we can of course apply this in other places too, like paragraphs or border colors. Now let's say after some time marketing comes back, and now we have to change the color and says that we need to change everything. Now we have the new hex value, and instead of going to all these elements where this color is used, like the H1, H2, and H3s, all I have to do is head into my variables and update it here. So I'll change it to something that's very obvious. So I'll go ahead and change this to red. And then I'll go into my headings down here, and you'll see that the styles did adopt what we just said in that variable. I didn't have to go into every element where I set this variable. I only headed into that variable selector. And again, I've only used it in my headings here. But what if we use them for our borders or specific paragraph styles? We'd be looking everywhere in the style sheet. So this is going to be a huge time saver, especially when we're updating. Now, some things to consider for CSS variables when you're using it is that normal rules of inheritance and cascading apply to CSS variables. CSS variables are case sensitive, so make sure that you are consistent when you're using them and creating them. You can change the value under media sections in order to override the value on the default medium. So if we want a different value for the variable when we go to print, or when a smaller screen size is detected, like when we're using a mobile phone or tablet, we can override what is set on the default medium to whatever we want in another medium. What about our old friend Internet Explorer? Well, unfortunately, CSS variables are not supported in IE, but not to worry, we do have a checkmark box for that to account for those that need to support viewers on IE. This checkmark box is available in your target file in the Advanced tab, and when you enable this feature, the CSS variable will be replaced by the actual value in the output so that the reader sees exactly what you want them to see. Now, the next feature that we're going to get into is actually covered by Jen, and this is going to be called Microcontent. So I'll go ahead and pass presenter rights over to Jen.
Thanks, Gio. All right, so microcontent, let's switch gears and talk a little bit about that. So what is this thing, microcontent? Well, microcontent can be text, it can be images, it can be video. This little bit of information that can be consumed by a reader in about 10 to 20 seconds. And this type of content is becoming really important for technical communicators, and content developers, whatever you call yourself. So many consumers of content today expect short, concise, relevant answers to questions that they have about a product or service. It can be thought of like an appetizer or maybe a teaser to other bits of content, maybe more long form content. So it captures the reader's attention and answers that question or need very quickly, often providing links to additional information, maybe a list of search results or other sites. So microcontent needs to be really precise. And as authors, we want to easily create it and be able to stick to the concepts of reuse that we all know and love. So I'm going to go out on a limb, but I'm assuming all of us used a search engine within the last 24 hours, maybe something like Google to find something. So as an example, we see microcontent all the time when we use Google. Think when you do a search, you see directed short bits of content that can answer your query in addition to the billions of pages of search results you're seeing. So these little things that we see, if I were to do a quick search in Google, here I did one on how do I blanch green beans. These things that we see at the top of the search results, they're called search engine results page features, or SERP, S-E-R-P for short. And they display on the page with the regular search results, like in this example that I'm seeing here. So again, I did this quick query. I've got 987,000 results that I can sift through if I want. But this little bit of content that's extracted from some other long form content answers my question really quickly. So I can still go through, but this is my quick answer. So that's one example of microcontent. We see it all the time with chatbots and virtual assistants. They're becoming increasingly popular. Think of those Alexas in your home. These are directed answers to very short questions. So more of this conversational experience. These are little micro moments that a user may have that are solved by micro content. We see microcontent connected to the world of augmented reality, where you've got this virtual content blended with these real world scenarios. It's a huge trend in training and development in lots of different industries. So we're seeing it more and more here. And I want to use this image because it does a great job of summarizing some of these concepts. Microcontent is really the backbone for so many things that we see now and that we're using day to day, and that we're going to continue to see as this technology continues to evolve. I just went through a couple of examples here. Just as our industry in the TechCom industry, it shifted from linear to book-based authoring years ago, to topic-based authoring. Well, so will a content author's ability and need to create micro content become more prevalent. So as a content creator, we need an easy way to create micro content, not only from scratch, but you should also be able to leverage and repurpose existing content that you're maintaining, because again, content reuse is what Flare is all about. So when we released this with Flare 2019, we wanted to make it easy for authors to not only create new microcontent in the form of phrase and response pairing, but also leverage content that you've already created in Flare and easily tag this as microcontent. So as we see in this image, microcontent that we create in Flare starts as phrases and responses, and they can become custom featured snippets in our search results. And that's the easiest, most immediate way to use microcontent with Flare, and that's actually what we're implementing out of the box. That's going to be our focus in the next minute or so, because that's what we're doing out of the box with that easy button. But as you can see from this diagram, with a little bit of elbow grease, you can actually use this content for other things that I've mentioned as well. For FAQ databases, feeding chatbots and machine learning, virtual and augmented reality. So it's not out of the box, but it's all there and it's available for you to use and do what you need to do with it. And I expect that as all of this evolves, this diagram is going to change in terms of what Flare will make out of the box. And so we're watching this very closely, particularly as standards for these things start to develop. So I'm going to pop over to Flare, and I want to show how we can use microcontent, where it all starts and how it all works. And then we're going to take a look at it in terms of the output. But before I do, I want to just start with the end in mind. I mentioned that we're using them in our search results in Flare. So I want to show you just a quick comparison so that you can see how it feels for your end user, how it improves the search experience. So let me pop over there, and let me just get rid of PowerPoint for a second. Okay, so let me just make sure you can see my screen. Yes. So I've got the online help for Flare open here. This happens to be the online help for Flare 2018. We can see that up here. So this is prior to us implementing Microcontent and having this available as a feature. Since we do drink our own champagne around here, we like to use these things. So here I am in Flare 2018. Say I'm a new user in Flare. I do a search for snippets. Maybe I want to learn about what these things are. Well, I get 474 great results that I can sift through and learn about snippets. But just to compare that same search experience, I'm pulling up the help from the current version of Flare, and if it were 2019, it'd be the same experience. So I also did a search for snippets. Again, this is the current version, but look at the difference here. Yes, I've got a lot of results I can sift through down at the bottom, but I have this little search results snippet right up here at the top. Okay, this little SERP, basically. I've got a little bit of information that answers my query quickly, some links to some additional information that may be useful, and I've got this nice little animation here to show me how easy it is to take a snippet and drag it into a topic. So it's more than just text. We're using a combination of things here to answer the query quickly. So I wanted to start with that just to kind of show you the end result and how much of a difference that is from a search experience. It's something that you can provide your readers because you're giving them so much great content, but help direct their query quickly. And that's what we're using this Microcontent for initially. Okay, so the other thing to note here, if I could, oops, I lost my screen to go back. It was really important. Data is really important here. So I'm going to say data now, but we're going to come back to data and analytics at the end. So stick a pin in that notion, because this thing about creating, phrases, these search queries like snippets or what are snippets, data is going to become really important to help you in this process. So stick a pin in that. I'm going to come back to that and kind of circle around. But let's turn our attention to Flare, and I want to talk about Microcontent, what it looks and feels like, and how we can create it. All right, so we've got our project here. By the way, I forgot to mention, Gio and I decided to have a little fun with this. We've made dueling projects. Our themes are, it's Lord of the Rings versus Star Wars today, so you'll see some different themes happening in our projects. So I've got my project open here. It starts by creating a Microcontent file in our project. Now, they typically will hang out in your resources folder by default. They can go anywhere in your Content Explorer, but that's where I'm going to put mine. I'm going to start by creating a Microcontent file. So I'll add new. So starting in 2019, when we go to file or add new, we'll have the option to add a Microcontent file. So if you're on an older version, you won't see this. Okay, so you have to go to 2019 at least to see it. I'm just going to give it a name. I'll call it Microcontent, and I'll click add. And it adds itself to this folder, and it kind of starts out with this basic placeholder thing. So over here on the left, it's the split screen view. These are my phrases that live over here on the left, and these are my targeted responses. So when we build out these phrases, we can have multiple phrases that point to the same response. So in this example, one way to start building out this Microcontent is to just start writing natively in this editor here. So in this example, we have a phrase called "What is Microcontent?" and we're pointing to this answer here. So this answer is just text written in this Microcontent editor. If we want to, we can have an alternate phrase. Maybe we can use, there's a little button here to add an alternate phrase. And maybe we just type in Microcontent. Maybe we think that's a query somebody may use. And so if they were to query on Microcontent, this is the content that they would see. Okay, so one way to do it, start creating those phrases and write in your content here in the Microcontent editor. Now the Microcontent editor is pretty simple. It looks and feels kind of like our XML editor, but we don't have a text editor here. We do have our structure bars. We can insert an image, all of those fun things are all supported. But another way, another approach is to reuse information that you already have. Okay, so if you don't have anything, you can of course write it here. But I've obviously got content, I've got snippets, I've got topics. I want to reuse that stuff as much as possible. So another approach, maybe I'll create another phrase. Okay, this is all about Lord of the Rings. So I'm going to create a phrase called elves. Okay, so I've got some content on elves. So here's a search query. And if I wanted to, I could type in my response. But I actually have a topic about elves. So next to my query here, there's a little expand and collapse. I have the option to add a link. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this query, I'm going to link it to an existing topic or snippet in my project, or even a bookmark within my topic. So in this case, I'm going to open up Peoples of Middle-earth. I happen to have a whole topic on elves, so I can reuse that. Okay, so I'll drop it in. I get a little message. I can't edit this because all of this stuff, it's coming from that long form topic. What's cool about this is if I edit my topic and I save, well, then my response is going to update as well. So again, we're adhering to this concept of reuse. But this may still be a little bit too long form. Remember, microcontent, we want it to be concise. And it's okay to link to the whole topic. But if we want to even shrink it down a little bit, maybe we think that, this could be too long form. So again, we can link it to existing content. If that topic changes, my response is going to change as well. But another approach is to maybe go into one of your topics or one of your snippets. Maybe you've got some content in there that would make a great response, and you want to reuse it. And by the way, once I've created this phrase, if I could just go back for a second, I can still continue to put in alternate phrases here. So I could type in something like, what are elves, for example. So both of those two queries, elves, what are elves, it's going to yield this microcontent result in addition to all of the other searches in my output. Okay, but again, maybe too long form. Let's look at another approach. Let me go into another topic. I'm going to go into lands of Middle Earth. I have a topic called Mordor here. Okay, so lots of long form content. If I were to search on Mordor, I'd get all this great information. But what if, for example, what if I realize, gosh, I want to create some phrases like Mordor, where is Mordor, map of Mordor, whatever it is, and I can use content in this topic as that featured snippet search result. So I've got some information here that I think would be a great SERP. So I can connect, or I can tag this, excuse me. I'll just select the div because this isn't a responsive layout div, because my content, we may look at it on a standard web browser, we may be looking at it on a phone or a tablet, so we want everything to respond appropriately. It's one thing that our topics and our snippets give us. We can use these responsive layouts, but we can't use a responsive layout in this editor here. We don't support it in this microcontent editor. So it's another case for reusing information. Another case for reusing information here in our existing topic. So I'll select this div. And in the home screen, there is a new button that if you have at least 2019 R2, you'll see this here called Create Microcontent. Okay, so I've got my content selected and I'm essentially going to tag it here as microcontent. So maybe I'll start by creating a phrase. Maybe I'll just say Mordor, okay? I'll click OK. And notice how it lists it here in my list of phrases. And there's that information that's pulling from my topic. If this needs to change, all I have to do is change it in my topic, right? We're all about reusing stuff in Flare. If we change it in our topic once, it's going to change everywhere that content is used. Those changes will cascade. And I can continue to come in here and create alternate phrases like, where is Mordor? Maybe what is Mordor? Any number of phrases can be created here, and they're all going to point to this answer. Okay, so again, a few ways to create it. Write it natively in the microcontent editor. So there's this option. We can create our phrase and we can link it to a topic or a snippet or even a bookmark, or we can tag existing content within a topic or snippet and make it microcontent and make a phrase and manage it that way. So again, probably the latter two methods are better approaches because again, it allows us to reuse content better. If we change our source content in our topic or snippet, it's going to update in our response. But linking to the entire topic may be a little bit too long form for the microcontent. So something to experiment with, but we give you a bunch of ways to create it. Again, you don't have to know the code or any kind of behind the scenes programmatic stuff. We're just reusing stuff we've already got in our projects. Okay, so I'm going to do a quick build so we can see the output here. So I've got everything tagged. Let me open up my target. I'll do a save all. Good advice I got once was save early, save often. If you've taken one of my trainings, I often say that, passing it on to you. So here we're going to do a quick build. And we're going to take a look. Should take a second. Okay, so we're done. And let's open this up. So here's my output, HTML5. Okay, so let's go ahead and search on elves. Okay, so we can see, here it's giving us this microcontent result, and I can still expand it here, right? And I've got more information I can see. So linking to the topic isn't bad, but again, it may be too long form. And by the way all of this looks, how much height we have here, whether we've got a link to the existing or the referencing topic where this comes from, all of this is configurable in the skin editor in Flare. So I'm just using some of the default settings here, but just know, like other things in our skin, we can customize the way these little SERPs look in our search page results. Let's go ahead and search for Mordor. So we can see lots of results here, obviously, only 7. In real world projects, you'd probably have more. But we can see this little bit of content here and the referencing topic where it comes from. So I've got an image of Mordor here. I've got a little bit of text. So it's more than just what a glossary term can do, right? We can combine these things together to give a directed answer to our reader's query. Okay, so again, very easy to create with our existing content, which ideally is the goal. So a little bit of microcontent. And again, remember this notion of data. I'm going to come back to this because I know that when we first talked about this, I got a lot of questions about, well, how do I actually begin this process? Well, we're going to talk about data and how that can help you in just a second. All right, so the next thing I want to talk about, let me switch gears here. I want to talk a little bit about MadCap Connect for Zendesk. So we got a lot of requests for folks who are using Zendesk as their internal ticketing system. And some folks are using Zendesk Guide as a presentation layer for some articles. Well, there's a new plugin in Flare 2019 that makes it really easy to publish output to your Zendesk Help Center guide. So if some or all of your topics that need to be accessed in your Zendesk guide, if we need to get them over there, because that's going to be the presentation layer for some or all of your content. Using this plugin means that you don't have to copy and paste your Flare topics into Zendesk, restyle it there, and then rinse and repeat that manual process every time there's an update to that source information in Flare. You update it in Flare, you republish, and all of those changes will update in all of the outputs you're generating, whether it's going to Zendesk Guide, or your PDF manuals, or HTML5 sites, etc. So I'm going to swap back over to Flare. We're going to talk about some of the mechanics to make this work. Let's go back over to my Lord of the Rings project here. Okay, so there's a few bits of mechanics that we need for this to happen, and I'm going to talk about these quickly. I want to first talk about a table of contents. Okay, so again, in Flare, a table of contents is used to, among other things, tell a target file what topics we want to include in the output. So when we're publishing to Zendesk, a good practice is to create a separate table of contents for this. So again, I've got my Zendesk guide already configured. Okay, since I've got a test site there, I've designed, I took a few minutes to design a rudimentary skin. You probably have a Zendesk, I should call it a theme. We call them skins, Zendesk calls them themes. So I have one designed, and with my guide configured, and when I install Flare, I can actually install the Zendesk plugin. It comes with Flare. It's not a separate install. You install it with Flare. You'll be able to test it if you want to. There's a 30-day trial of it. The trial doesn't start when you install Flare. It starts when you actually activate it in the destination file, which I'll show you in a second. So I've got all of the big bits configured, particularly my Zendesk guide. I've got that set up. And what's great about the plugin is we can publish HTML5 targets from Flare and have them go to Zendesk to preserve things like our style sheets and the styles that we're using in Flare if we want, conditional expressions that we're using in our source content, text variables that we may be using. And when we use HTML5 as our target type, that means we can also preserve dynamic linking effects like drop downs and expanding text. If we look at that elves topic, for example, let me pull up that elves one because that's one that's going to go over there. We've got a little bit of everything. We've got images, we've got a drop down here. I've got some text pop-ups with some definitions. So we've got a lot going on this topic. Now, when it comes to the table of contents, we can align a table of contents in Flare to the navigation elements in our Zendesk guide. So the recommendation here is to create a separate table of contents for Zendesk publishing, since Zendesk TOCs work a little differently than Flare TOCs. So in my example here, I created a table of contents for my Zendesk guide that includes all of the topics that I want published over there. So this TOC that I built here is structured to mimic the navigation in Zendesk. So Zendesk has this concept in their TOCs. They have what are called categories, they have something called sections, and then they have articles. So in Flare, what I did is I created a TOC to kind of mimic that experience. So my top level book in Flare can be mapped to a category in Zendesk. My second level books, those are going to get mapped to sections in Zendesk. And then my individual pages here, well, these are going to become my articles in my guide. So I created a separate Zendesk TOC to kind of mimic that so I could respect what's happening on the Zendesk side of things. Okay, so I've got my TOC laid out. The next thing I want to do is I want to talk about this concept of a publishing destination. We will need that in order to publish to Zendesk. So for those of you who don't know, a publishing destination, they live in your project organizer in their own folder. Okay, you can create as many publishing destinations if you want. Oftentimes we use this as a set of rules to take the content that we build and automatically copy it to a location, maybe an internal web server. Well, in this case, I created a publishing destination and I just named it Zendesk so I know. So if you're going to be testing this internally, this is where you're going to want to set up that trial or activate that trial of MadCap Connect for Zendesk. So if you've got it installed, when you open up your destination file, under type, you'll see it as an option here. Okay, so these are sort of our web server options, source control options. We came out with this a few years ago if you're publishing to Salesforce, but new now would be the option to publish to Zendesk. So I have that selected. And this would, I've already activated my trial, but this would say activate, and that's what's going to start that ticker if you wanted to test it internally. Okay, so I'll log in. Remember, I had my Zendesk guide already configured, so I had the option to log in, which I already did. And when you log in successfully, you've got a lot of options here. I'm going to roll with most of the defaults just to keep it simple, but we do have some choices. I do want to use my Flare TOC to define those categories and sections. Zendesk does require that we set up a default category and section, sort of as a catch-all. If there's something that's duplicated or something goes awry, it's going to go here. So I've just created 2 categories and sections that were already in my guide as the default. And then I've got some other options here that I'm going to roll with. Now, if you're using a lot of dynamic linking like drop-downs and those image pop-ups, for example, I would encourage you to preserve this option of unsafe HTML. I think the verbiage is a little funny here because this sounds really scary, preserve unsafe HTML, but it's actually not. You want to just preserve those dynamic linking effects that you've got in your source topics because Zendesk doesn't have those capabilities in their editor. So there's a setting here in Flare that lets you preserve them. There's also a setting in Zendesk when you set up your guide to preserve those things as well. So we're just borrowing, they call it unsafe HTML, although I don't really think it's unsafe. So we're just preserving or reusing some of their verbiage here. And I'm just going to roll with the rest of the defaults. Okay, so I've got my destination or my rule set up here. The last thing is my target. So let me open up my Zendesk target. So it's this guy here. I called it ZD guide, so I know that this is for Zendesk. A couple things. I'm publishing HTML5. I want to tell that target, like anything else, what table of contents I want to use, what topics are destined to live over there. I've got my skin set to none because Zendesk is going to be the presentation layer for all of this stuff. Okay, so my Flare skin is not. Some of these topics may live in an HTML5 site, they may live in a PDF guide, but for this target, they're going to Zendesk. So we're not using any kind of Flare skin. I can set any kind of conditional text I want, my variables, any kind of overrides I need to make, I can. And then in my publishing tab, I want to choose my Zendesk publishing destination, that one that I just configured. I want to use those rules for the handoff. The last step is just click publish. So when we publish a target, that builds everything and then hands it over to our destination automatically. Okay, so I went ahead and took a minute to do that since every second is precious in this long webinar today. So I published those topics over to my guide and I'll go ahead and pull it up. Okay, so here's now don't judge, I did this in about 5 seconds. I created this theme. I'm trying to keep it within the Lord of the Rings theme here. So I've got my Zendesk guide. Okay, this is not a Flare skin, but we can see if I delete, these are my Zendesk categories here. Okay, that was my default category that was there. So I've got my default category, people of, not my default category, one of my categories here. This was my top level book, one of my top level books in my TOC. Oops, I was idle there. It wants me to sign in. Elves was one of my sections, so I can see all of these various sections exposed now in this category. And if I go into my elves topic, this is one of my articles, all of my content is preserved. I even have that unsafe thumbnail image there because I'm saying that facetiously, of course. The point is that all of that styling is preserved when we hand it over to Zendesk. There's my content, there's that embedded video, and of course I've got my drop down here that is preserved along with my text pop-ups. So if this article changes, I can update it in Flare and republish to all of my targets. Everywhere this topic is used, of course, those changes will update. I don't have to make any other changes in Zendesk because that source is coming from Flare. So automatic publishing, no copying and pasting, no rinse and repeating. We can update that source material in one spot. So a little bit about the Zendesk publishing there. I'm going to go ahead and turn the mic over to Gio, though, and he's going to talk about responsive content personalization next.
Great, thanks, Jen. All right, so another new feature that we introduced this year, and this one is in Flare 2019 R2, is responsive content personalization. Well, we know that using conditions, we can pick and choose which content we would like to display per target. But now using conditions, we can choose which content we would like to display based on the media query and size of the screen. This gives us more control over content when the screen changes, and can make some content easier to read on different devices. With responsive content, we took a major step forward in creating content personalization based on user type and device or environment. Nobody else in the industry does content personalization as easy as we make it. So let's start this off by showing what the behavior looks like and an output, which the end user would essentially see. So we have our online help here currently in the default web size, and this is the Star Wars portion of our webinar here. And as we know, all of Flare's HTML5 outputs are responsive and automatically adjust. But this new edition features changing the actual content and not just changing the skin or moving things around to fit the size of the screen. So I want you guys to pay attention to the icons that we have here while we are on the web screen size. Now, when we resize the screen, you'll notice that the icons will change to something that's more appropriate to the size of the screen or the device that we're using. So when we switch to tablet or mobile medium, you'll notice that the icons will change from a click icon that we saw earlier to now a swipe icon because we're in our tablet medium, and a tap icon because we're in our mobile medium. Now we could also make text responsive as well, as it no longer says click and now it says tap. For our mobile phones, and then for our tablet users it says swipe. So let's go into Flare to show how to set this up. Now we'll first start off by creating our new conditions. I'll open up my responsive content conditions condition set. Now I've already created these to save us a little bit of time. But we'll call our conditions mobile, tablet, and web. Now we can of course name these conditions anything that we want, as they are arbitrary values just like normal conditions. And as a best practice, it also is beneficial to create these conditions in a separate tag set from the other conditions, mainly for organizational purposes. And I'll show you why this is going to be really helpful once we get into the target. But now that I've created my conditions, the next step is we're going to tag our content. So I'll go ahead and open up one of my topics here, my Millennium Falcon Blueprint topic. And this is just a basic topic, but it contains a very detailed image with a lot of small text. Now, this image with the small text, this may be suitable when reviewing this on our larger screens like our laptops or computer screens. But when we're gonna be viewing this on our smaller screens like our tablet or mobile phones, this text is going to be entirely way too small to read for those kinds of users. So what we're going to do here is we're gonna personalize our content for our mobile and tablet users by inserting another image with much larger text that's easier to read, of course. And now we have two images here. Now we won't actually be seeing two images in our output because we're going to go ahead and condition our images to only appear once we're in a specific medium. So for my image on top with the small text, I'll go ahead and condition this to only appear once we're in the web medium. And then I'll condition my image below to only appear once we're in the mobile medium, and the tablet medium. And we can throw multiple responsive conditions on a piece of content, just like other conditions as well. But now that we've tagged our content, the next step is we're going to open our target and we're going to set up the conditions there. And you'll notice that we did change the condition tab a little bit to make setting up the conditions and controlling the behavior much easier. And we'll come back as to why we did this later. So we did remove the include and exclude check marks and replaced it with an action column on the right that allows us to select the action. Now by default, all of our conditions will be initially set to not set. Now to use responsive content on conditions, I'll go ahead and select my responsive content conditions here. We'll select our condition, and in the action column, we'll select display by media query, and then we'll select the media query that we would like it to use. So I already have these set here, but we'll set our mobile condition to, of course, mobile. We'll set tablet to tablet, and then we'll set web to web. Now, as you could see, this is where we're also making a separate condition tag set comes in handy when we're setting this up. Now, we don't have to set this up in a separate tag set, but that way this doesn't get mixed up with the rest of our conditions when we're setting just our responsive conditions. Like if we had, for example, like 30 conditions here, it would take a little bit of time to find which ones we want to set for our responsive ones. So this makes it a little bit easier. And also by changing to the action column, this makes what action will happen to the condition much more clear. With the previous version, if a condition was not selected, it wasn't very clear as to what might happen to that condition, whether it's going to be excluded or included. There's actually been a common belief going around that if a condition isn't checked, then it will be automatically included, and that was the rule. Well, that actually hasn't been the case because the behavior of the condition is actually determined by the action of the rest of the conditions that are set. And this has always been a rule, even in previous versions and the way that conditions have always worked. So what I mean by that, the way that they actually work is that if I have my condition that hasn't been set, and we know that a condition isn't set because it's included, because it says the action there, but it's grayed out, and it also has it in the parentheses there. But if I set a condition to include, then the rest of the conditions that have not been set will be then excluded from our output. They won't show up. Whereas if I set a single condition to exclude, and the rest of the conditions that have not been set will then be included in our output. Now, this was a lot harder to visualize in previous versions of Flare, but in this version, we could explicitly now see the action right there, so there's no more guesswork. Now, these condition options displayed by media query, this won't be available in other targets that don't support it. So if we go into like a word target or a print-based target, those options aren't available for us, so we don't have to worry about accidentally setting that in the wrong target. But let me go ahead and build my target now that everything is set. And I'd also like to mention that you can also view this responsive content within the preview of your topic. So that way you don't have to build all of your output and all of your files to see this behavior. And you could also see this within the target editor, within the topic editor as well. But now that my output is built, I'll go ahead and double click on that. Close one of those tabs. And let me resize this up. So we're in the default web size. I'll go ahead and click on my topic here. And as expected, we're going to be seeing the image with the small text because we are in a larger screen size view. But when we resize this down to our tablet or mobile phones, it does switch to the image with the large text, so that way we could read it. All right, so that's responsive content personalization. Now, the next feature that I would like to get into is an easy way to bring our files into our Flare project, as we can now drag and drop external files straight into our Flare project. So we could drag files as well as copy and paste them, and they will automatically get inserted into the folder that we drop them into. So this is going to be especially useful when we're copying in our resource files like our graphics and even our PDFs. We don't have to go into the Windows Explorer to drop in these types of files anymore and involve more clicks and have more windows open than we have to. We made this more effortless and intuitive by being able to stay within Flare. So I'll go back into Flare. Let me go into the Contents Explorer here. And let's say I have my 4 images and I want to bring this into my project. So I could quickly do this by grabbing all 4 of my images, and then I'll drop it into my new images folder. And you'll see that they are added. All 4 of my images are added in the folder that I just dropped them into. Now, if I want to drop in other resource files, like let's say a PDF, I could quickly drag and drop that into my Content Explorer. And now if we do accidentally drop a file into the Content Explorer that shouldn't go in there, like a skin file, oops, Flare will actually detect it, that it's a skin file, it doesn't belong in here, it won't let us drop it in. But if we do drop a file into the project organizer, like that same skin file, Flare will actually sort it out for us. So once I go ahead and copy this in, it automatically puts it into the folder that it's supposed to be in. So that way we know exactly where to look for it. Now, if we do drop a file that we could go ahead and import, this will prompt Flare to ask if we would like to copy the files into the project or import them in with the new import wizard, which segues us into the next feature that I would like to talk about, which are some of the word import improvements that were made. Migrating content has never been easier with the redesigned word import structure and drag and drop import. We streamlined the workflow and made the import process and options much easier to understand for our users, resulting in a much quicker import. So I'll jump back into Flare. Now we can still import our Word documents in the same way as previous versions by going to Project Import or going to File and starting our project that way. Or we can bypass all of that with the effortless drag and drop import by simply taking our Word document and dragging it into the Content Explorer. So I'll select Import, and then Flare will bring up the Import Wizard. Now, this is going to be the Word document that I'm going to be bringing into Flare. It's just a sample Word document here, but it contains everything that you would see in a typical Word document. Here we have multiple headings, we have an image, we have a table. So let's go ahead and see how easy it is to bring this into Flare. I'll close out of this. Now the wizard will populate with the files that we did drop in. It will also specify the folder that we dropped them into as well. Now, as you could tell, some of the structure has changed in our import wizard. In previous versions, we did use next and back buttons here at the bottom to move through the pages. But now the wizard just has one required page, which is the general, and 2 that are optional, which are the styles and the advanced options. Now from the general page, the one that we're on, depending on how our document is formatted, and if we would like to use those default import settings and break our Word document on every H1 detected, we could actually hit finish right now, right after dropping in those files, making this one of the fastest Word imports with just a couple of steps. If you know how to do a drag and drop, you now know how to do a Word import in Flare. It's that easy. But let's go ahead and see what's new in some of the optional tabs that we have here. I'll go into the styles page. Now, we can't go over every option during this webinar because we don't have enough time, but we'll definitely cover which ones are the new ones that we have. So we combined multiple pages from the old wizard into one on the styles page. This allows us to move through the import quicker and essentially do much more on one screen. So we can select an existing style sheet to associate with. And after doing this, the styles from the style sheet will become available when we map our styles here in the dropdown. Here in this dropdown, it also lets you know which ones are the Flare styles that we could choose from and which ones are the Word styles. Using the default names, we could choose to retain those Word style names when we're mapping, or we can get rid of those and opt to use the base heading names by selecting Discard MS Word Styles. This pretty much replaced the Do Not Preserve Word Styles and the Preserve Word Styles that we may be more used to in previous versions. And for those styles that we would like to break those long linear Word documents on, we can quickly check which styles we would like to start a new topic here in this column. So I'll do that for my heading 1s and heading 2s. We'll start a new topic on those whenever they're detected. Now under the advanced options, some of the new features include the ability to select if we would like to create a new style sheet. In previous versions, a new style sheet was actually always created upon import, which can get a little tedious, especially if we're doing a lot of imports and we have to manage and delete every style sheet that was added if we don't want to use them. So when this option is disabled, I'll go ahead and disable it here. The styles resulting from the import will actually be added to the end of the project's master style sheet. So since I deselected that, we'll show what that looks like after our import. We could also manage how our tables import, as we could retain the look of our tables, make them look the same as they were in our Word document, and bring in these styles into our regular style sheet, or we can bring them in as a Flare table style sheet. If we have any table style sheets that we want to use and use any of those existing table styles, we have that option. Or we could just remove all those table styles so we could apply them later after the import. Having this list option checked will allow us to convert those word lists into standard bullets or numbers in Flare. But when you keep this disabled, the list will import with the symbols used in the Word document so that we can keep those special elements for custom lists or for auto numbers. However, when these import, these will be contained within span tags when they are imported into Flare. And also in previous versions, if there was a page break detected or found in the Word document, Flare automatically created a new topic on that page break. But there was a little problems with this because since sometimes a page break won't be followed by a heading and instead will be followed by normal paragraph text or like a table. So we have more control over these page breaks now by allowing us to decide whether we would like to create a new topic on those page breaks or convert them to MadCap page breaks, or we could simply ignore them. So now that we've gone through the options here, I can select finish. We'll get a quick preview of all the files that we're going to be bringing into Flare. Everything looks good. It looks pretty similar to what we just had in that Word document. I could select accept. And now if I look into my Word imports folder, I'll see all those files that I have added into my project resulting from our Word import here. And also, because we chose to not create a new style sheet, we chose to add those styles from the import into our existing style sheet here. I'll open up my style sheet in the internal text editor. And as I scroll to the bottom, Flare lets you know where those styles start resulting from the import, the ones that were added by this comment that's left here that says where the source Word document is located. Now, additionally, for those that are outputting into Word, we also added the ability to output straight into docx format. Originally, we could do this, but we had to do a workaround where we had to add the extension docx in the target. But now we have this option available for our users here. Now, moving on to the next feature with Flare 2019 R2, we also added a Confluence import.
I just muted myself. So tagging on to this new import theme, we've also added support for importing Confluence pages. So if you've got existing content in Confluence that you would like to easily repurpose, or perhaps teammates that use it and you need to work with their content, well, now you can point to those spaces and bring those pages in. So you can import these into a brand new Flare project or to an existing one. This import process supports both the cloud and the local versions of Confluence. So I'll switch over to Flare and we'll do a quick import and take a look at some of those options there. So I'll go ahead and switch back over here. Let me go back to our Star Wars project. So here I am in Flare. Let me just make sure you can see what I'm seeing here. Okay, looks like we're all up to date. So as I mentioned, if you were starting a brand new Flare project, which we can do from the File menu, and we go New, you'll see a new option to import Confluence pages. So this isn't Flare 2019 R2. So if you've got 2019 or earlier, you won't see this option. Or if you've got a project already brewing, like I have here, we can point to a Confluence space and bring those pages in. So that's what I'm going to do for this quick example. So from the project ribbon, which is where we import files in to an existing project, if we open up this or expose this import option here, you'll see a new option to choose Confluence pages. So this is going to start that wizard to bring them in. So I'll select that. And so again, we've tried to reduce the amount of screens we have to get through to get these files in. So because we're bringing this into a project here, I'm going to go ahead and tell Flare I would like these pages that I'm importing to come into this specific folder. I'm going to log into my Confluence server. I happen to be, we have an on-prem version of Confluence. I'm going to choose put my server name in there, my username, and then my password, which it remembers the last time I did it, which was nice. So I'll click submit. Oh, look at that. This means you get $1. Just a second. Okay, so let's make sure I did that correctly. Let me just pause for a moment. And I got to bring up, I couldn't remember my password, so I put it on a little sticky note on my machine so I could get to it. And I can't seem to find it. Ah, there it is. Okay. Bear with me a second. Okay. Let me just make sure you're seeing what I'm seeing now. Okay, so it looks like we're back. So I went ahead and I logged into my I think I was idle on my Confluence page and I had to log back in order to get to it. So I've logged into my Confluence space from Flare. And when you successfully log in, you can choose your space here. And you can tell this area here, well, what pages do you want to bring in? So before I bring these in, let me go ahead and show you my Confluence page here. So I've got a few pages that I've created in Confluence, some camp policies, instructor policies, and then a quick training camp overview. And this is the stuff I want to repurpose in my Flare project. So I just wanted to show you my source first. So when we swap back over to Flare, these are the 3 pages that I'd like to bring in. In the advanced options here, we have some choices. Do we want to bring in any linked pages? Maybe one of those is pointing to another Confluence page in another space. Well, keeping that check there means that any linked pages are going to come in as a result of that import as well. So you may see, I may see more than just those 3 pages if I'm linking to something else. And then I have some choices in terms of how I handle the inline formatting and some of those style classes in those Confluence pages. If you've got images, you want to probably import those resources. So this just means preserve those images in my Confluence pages and go ahead and put them in that images folder that's kept over here in the resources folder in Flare by default. Or you can say, hey, I want you to go into a special folder. So you can choose it specifically or just put it into the default images folder that lives over here in resources. And then we also have an option here to link generated files to the source files. What does this mean? Well, what if those pages that you're linking to are constantly being updated? By checking that box, we're essentially turning Flare off as the editor for those files, and we're using Flare more as a publishing engine for them. And so if they're constantly being updated in Confluence, you may choose to keep that link there. You'll have to re-import those changes prior to publishing, but that's a choice you can make. Unchecking that box is saying, okay, let's cut the cord from Confluence for these files. We're going to continue to update them and massage them in Flare going forward and publish them out of Flare. So that's a choice you can make. So I'm going to bring them in and I'm going to cut the cord in this example. And then I'll go ahead and click Finish. And we'll start that import process. And it looks like we have a little bit of a lag in GoTo, so I'm going to let it catch up. Okay. There, now you're seeing what I'm seeing. So just like other imports, we have a quick preview here. I'm going to go ahead and click Accept. And my new pages are here in my into this folder that I specified. So if I open this guy up, we'll take a look at it. And so here's all that content. Again, it's talking to my Flare project style sheet. That Confluence page became an H1, or what's called the page title, I believe it's called. I'm not a Confluence expert, so forgive me. But the name of that page gets translated to an H1 in my Flare topic, and then all of those subheadings map appropriately as well. So really quick way to get that information in if we want to. Okay. So the next thing I want to talk about, and I see a couple questions coming in, and I'll do my best to address those at the end since we have a little bit more information to get through here. So just wanted to wrap up there on the Confluence side of things. The next thing I want to talk about, let me just wait for GoToWebinar to catch up. Give me a second here. Oh boy, looks like we have a little bit of a delay. Let me just give it a second. Bear with me, guys. It's always fun when you do these things live, right? Okay. So I want to talk about, let me switch. Okay, so looks like you're caught up and now seeing what I'm seeing. Apologies. Okay, so that covers the main features I wanted to review in Flare. Wanted to turn our attention to MadCap Central, which received a brand new interface, some functionality enhancements, and also new features that work with Flare, including output analytics and the ability to publish to Central directly from Flare. So before we take a look at that, I just want to review quickly for those of you who may not be familiar what Central is. Well, it's a cloud-based platform that we developed that works with Flare. It doesn't replace Flare, but works with it. And the goal of Central is to help you plan and help you track, manage various processes, Flare content, and the teams that are responsible for producing documentation. And we built this because we know that there's some things that folks want that Flare can't solve on its own as a desktop tool. So Central does a lot of things. Real quick and easy source control. Teams of writers want to get source control set up quickly. They may not have IT resources to get everything set up, or perhaps you don't like the source control solution that you're using, and getting help from IT can feel daunting. This is an area where Central can help. We can quickly and easy have source control set up among our team so that as technical writers using Flare, we can easily collaborate and stay in sync. We have an extremely easy to use task board that writers can use to stay on track with all the things they have to do to get content out the door, including detailed project level checklists that can tie into our project files where we can create little milestones and we know where we are and how far we have to go to get content out the door. The review workflow has been challenging, for some folks. We always offered MadCap Contributor as a way to fold in subject matter experts into the review process. But we often heard it was challenging to get SMEs to install and use another piece of software. So what we've done now with Central is we've done away with the need to install and learn any kind of desktop tool. MadCap Central offers an extremely easy and simple, lightweight, web-based editor. So our SMEs can review our source content, collaborate, and add annotations using this lightweight editor. So we keep the power of Flare as a desktop tool for the authors, and we've paired it now with this web-based editor for the SMEs to make those reviews and those edits and get that collaboration quickly and easily. A couple other things here. Central offers a very easy way to manage our builds. If we want to build things programmatically, we don't have to purchase additional build servers or understand the command line interface to make that happen. If Central can see our projects, well, then we can tell Central to build our targets at 1 a.m. And when we log in, we have fresh builds to review, private staged builds for the team to check out. If those builds look good, well, with a single click of a button, if we've got the right permissions, we can turn our content to live, and we can make all of that information available to our readers and manage vanity URLs so those URLs look branded like they're coming from our own company. We also recently offered an easy way to get our targets translated. So if you've got a number of guides or sites that you need translated into other languages, you can tell Central which targets need to be translated and what languages you need to translate them into. And we'll package them all of them up. They'll be reviewed by our Mad Translation team in about a day or so. You'll have a full analysis and a quote. Not a binding quote, but at least you have an idea of how much it's going to cost and how long it's going to take. And perhaps that quote's competitive to what you're already paying now. And then the last thing is output analytics, which we just released in October. And so this is so important. When you provide searchable and findable content to your readers, you're empowering them to find the answers they need wherever they need it on whatever device they're using. And what you're doing is you can really help reduce the number of searches that come back with nothing found, which oftentimes lead to more expensive tech support calls. Right? You start having a much bigger and positive impact on the bottom line of your company. Not that you don't want to talk to your customers, but we know that the cost of self-help is so much less than the cost of that support department. And so if we can provide them what they need quickly, your customers are happy, and it frees up those support folks to handle those more challenging questions too. And we can see that we can use these analytics for other things too, like helping build out microcontent to improve search, and maybe make some decisions about what browsers we support going forward, not just for the help, but for our applications as well, if we create browser-based applications. And same with operating system statistics. So it helps us with a lot of things, not just for searching. And what's great about this is if you have a MadCap Central account, then that's all you need. Your Flare project doesn't have to be bound to Central. You don't have to publish your output to Central. You can publish your output anywhere. You can even live on a private web server that requires your users to authenticate to get to that information. As long as your reader, whoever's looking at that information, if they have an internet connection, then we can start gathering data on it, or Central can start gathering data on it, and you can start reporting on it and making that body of knowledge better based on how people are using it every day. So let's go ahead and turn our attention to Central real quick and we'll take a look. So I'm going to open up my license of Central. Now, if you haven't logged in recently, then I would encourage you to do so. But you'll notice what's new, again, which just came out last month, is this new analytics page in Central. So we didn't have this previously, but now we do. So when I select this analytics page, what I'm looking at here are a list of all of the individual targets that I'm tracking for analytics. So my One Central account allows me to get data on as many targets as I want, okay? So I want to take a look at one of these. I want to show you the data that I'm capturing on an output that's published to an internal server here at MadCap that only certain people can get to. The world can't see it. And then I want to show you how easy it is to get this set up and start capturing data. Okay, so let me open up this knowledge base here. And what I'm looking at first is sort of the details of all of this. So let's first talk about these phrases. What this is showing me for this output that I'm generating out of Flare, it happens to be called Soledad KB, or KB knowledge base for short. So what I'm looking at here are all of the queries that are being used to search on that knowledge base. And I'm seeing the number of times that that keyword was actually used. So that the term keyword was searched on 20 times. It yielded 3 results, but it didn't deliver any microcontent result. And it also shows me the last search that was done. And I have this sorted by the number of searches, so the most popular search queries all the way down to the least popular ones. So this is showing us the keywords that people are using. So if we tie this back to the microcontent thing, why is this cool? Well, this gives us an idea of what we can start with when we start building out those queries in our microcontent editor. You know, where do we begin? Well, let's take a look at what everybody's searching on. This is what we did internally. We looked at the data, and we used these queries that everybody was using to start building out the phrases. So maybe I start creating some phrases around features. What are features? Using features, whatever it is. I have a starting point here. It's taking the guesswork out of where to begin. So I can quickly create queries in my microcontent file, or phrases in my microcontent file, I should say, and start thinking about those responses that I want to give. So this is a great starting point. Phrases with no result, in my opinion, this is one of the most popular data metrics that this is going to provide, and something that's going to pay for this thing really, really quickly. These are the phrases that people are typing in that are coming back with no results. So this is the stuff people are looking for where they're not finding any answers. So perhaps leading to a more expensive support call or opening up a ticket and taking them longer to get that question. So here I can see a lot of queries on JavaScript examples, scripting, you know, and how many times somebody searched on it, those terms, and came back with nothing. So now I know how to augment my documentation, my knowledge base, whatever it is I'm creating, based on how people are using it every day and what they're not finding. Topics, these are the most important topics that people are looking at and how many times those topics are being hit. So again, this is the content that you probably want to keep up to date because this is really popular, or these topics are very popular among my readers. Maybe you build out a landing page in your output and you have a section in there that says most popular topics. You know, maybe you are developing a knowledge base specific site. Maybe you have a most popular topic section. Well, now it kind of takes the guesswork out. You know what's popular. You can log in and see this instantaneously. If you're taking your output from Flare and you're attaching it to an application, this is showing us those calls that are being made from the application. What topics are being called? So we can help determine here, where in the application are my readers getting stuck? Maybe this isn't a documentation problem. Maybe this is a UX problem. You know, everybody's getting stuck and they're calling, you know, this particular topic here. What's going on this part of the interface? You know, so can we make the UI better? Can we make the training better? Can we make the help better based on this information? And then browser and operating system statistics. This is showing us the browsers that are being used to hit our documentation site. So maybe we make some decisions. You know, if I come down here and I see a small percentage of people are using these, you know, this old version of Edge, do we need to keep testing for that version and keep using it? Or do we encourage folks to, you know, upgrade to that latest version or say, hey, this is only supported in this version? You know, so again, it just helps you make some decisions about what you do internally. Also, maybe you didn't think you had any mobile viewers. Well, this is going to show you. So we can see, you know, here we've got some mobile users here. Same thing with operating system statistics. What OSs are being used? If you didn't think you had mobile readers, well, this is going to show you. Maybe you need to start thinking about creating some responsive layouts in your Flare topics to ensure that everything looks great on a mobile phone. And we can also use these date filters here. So if we want to see how we're doing over time, We can always filter the data that we see. Maybe we only want to look at the last 30 days, for example. How are we doing on those phrases with no results? So we can put in the dates here if we want. So again, I just wanted to show this with kind of the end in mind. Now I want to show you how easy it is to create. Okay, so I'm going to open up my Star Wars project once again. Now this project is not bound to Central at all. I mentioned that we don't need to bind our project to Central in order for this to work, and this is not. So what I'm going to do, I'll go to my target that I want to track, and in 2019 R2, we've got a new analytics tab. All you have to do is have that Central account, as I mentioned. So I chose my provider, which is Central. Prior to having Central, we had a server-side install program called MadCap Pulse that allowed us to track data. But again, it was a server-side install. We had to get IT to do that for us, and there were a lot more steps than what we're doing here. All I need here is that one Central account. I logged into my trial license. I chose my Central license here, which I already did. And all I have to do is create a key. This is establishing that tracking so that we can start getting data on this. So maybe I'll call this Star Wars KB. I can put in some text description. I can call this whatever I want, something descriptive to let me know what target this is. So when I look at it in Central, it makes sense. So I click OK, and that's all I need to do. Now I'm going to go ahead and click Build so that we can see it. Now while that's building, let me pop back over to Central so you can see. If I go to my Analytics tab once again, I'm going to let GoToWebinar catch up because you're not quite seeing what I'm seeing. Okay, so here it is. There's that Star Wars KB little tracker that I created. So it was just that instantaneous. So Central can start seeing it now. Let's go back to Flare because I think it's probably done building. Let me open up my output file. So here's our galactic knowledge base we were looking at earlier, and I'm just going to start using it. So let me say, light side. I'm doing some searches here. I got a result. Let me go ahead and search on that a couple times. I'll go ahead and click some topics. And again, I'm just kind of clicking around because I just want to populate that with some data, okay? So we'll search on that a few times. Let me go ahead and do a search on something that I know isn't in there. I don't think Geo's in there, so let me search on his name a few times. And if we go back to Central, if I open up my Star Wars KB, we can instantly see that data is coming through. Okay, so I searched on light side 4 times, it yielded that one result. There was Geo, I searched on that 5 times. Okay, my topic views, this is showing me instantaneously all those topics I looked at. Now I don't have this hooked up to an application, so I'm not going to have any context sensitive help calls. But our browser statistics, of course, I'm the only one looking at it, and the operating system statistics. So the point here is we can publish our output anywhere, okay? This is so easy to set up. We have instant data with just a few clicks. We don't have to configure any server-side software or get a Windows server set up and all those things needed. Okay, again, super easy. As I mentioned, our projects don't have to be bound to Central. Okay, all you need is that one Central account. We can publish our output anywhere. Central doesn't have to host it. So if you want to publish it to your own public web server, your own private web server, that's fully supported. And we can gather analytics on an unlimited number of targets. So our Central account will support that. And again, just to remind everybody, it's really, really easy. So much easier than what we used to have to do before. So if you haven't tried this already, I would encourage you to get a trial and test it with your output because it's very easy to do. Quickly want to review one of the last major features that we came out with, which is the ability to publish directly to Central from Flare. And now if you remember from that previous slide, one of the features of Central that I mentioned is that it can be used to easily stage and easily host content for your end users. Okay, that is an option of Central if you did want to host it there. So previously, to get generated Flare output on MadCap Central, you needed to build your target on Central itself. Well, you can still do that. It's easy to do, but you also now have that option of publishing output directly to Central from your local Flare project. Central essentially becomes an automatic publishing destination for you in Flare. You still need to set your outputs to live on Central if you want the world to see them and if you want to host them there, but this saves an extra building step in Central. And it offers a few other perks too if you happen to be using Central for other things. So if you are using batch targets in Flare and you are building using the command line in Flare rather than in Central, well, as I mentioned, Central becomes a built-in publishing destination for you. So all of those batch targets that you've set up in Flare are supported. So Central essentially becomes another place for that batch target to go. If you use pre and post build events in your Flare targets, well, those are supported. If you're only building on Central, build events unfortunately aren't supported, but using this approach, they will be. If you want to host your outputs live on Central because it's so easy and you want to use Elasticsearch, well, then this ensures Elasticsearch is supported as well. If you've got content stored in external resources that you automatically want to import when you build, like images or linked Word docs, well, those actions are supported when you publish directly to Central from Flare. Again, if you're using Central as a hosting engine. Maybe you work as a team and you've got a snapshot of the projects. Maybe you want to do a quick publish to Central and you want to publish the current state of that project and have your team log in and QA it, see how it's looking. Central can stage that local build for your teammates. Maybe you wanted to make a quick change to the skin or your CSS file and not merge in all of the changes from anybody else. Well, this is a way to do that quickly. Okay, so let's go ahead and pop back over and I'll just show you how to do this. Again, this is one of those features where I mentioned, analytics doesn't require you to be bound to Central. For this feature, we do have to be bound to Central. So I'm going to go back up to my Lord of the Rings project here, which happens to be already connected to Central. So if we look at my Central pane here, I took a moment and I bound it already, or it's bound already, proper English. So it's already connected, Central can see it. When I open up one of my HTML5 targets, actually any of my targets here, when I go over to publishing, my publishing tab, Central automatically shows up as a publishing destination for me. I don't have to configure a separate destination file. Because I'm connected, it's an option for me to publish to. So I can still publish this HTML5 site to other web servers if I want. I happen to have two here. Central's a web server. I have my own web server here. So when I click publish, this target's going to build and then go to the respective destinations that I've set here. And if we were to open this up in Central, I went ahead and did it right before just to save a minute. So here's my project. So I have my Lord of the Ring project here. And I've got my HTML5 build. Okay, so these are all my targets in that project, but I'm just looking at this one. This actually shows us where that publish exercise came from. So here we have a little icon. Okay, so this build I did on Central, because I can right click and I can build these manually. I said you could still do that. This build, however, has the Flare icon. So it actually came from Flare. So this tells us where that's actually coming from. And again, I can log in here, I can view it. It's a staged build, we can check it out. And if we're ready, we can set it to live if we want to. So this is just telling us where that publish came from. Did it come from Central? Did we build it here? Or did it come from Flare? So both options are available. Okay, some additional features I want to talk about before we get to some, maybe just one or two questions, since we've certainly gone over our time here. HTML5 accessibility enhancements. So in this release, we included a lot of improvements around accessibility, which has to do with making sure that your documentation can be accessed by people with disabilities, perhaps individuals who have visual, hearing, certain mobility impairments. So the keyboard navigation experience has been improved for elements like menus and logos and buttons. Also, there's a skip to main content option that we'll see. So in previous versions, users working with a screen reader in HTML5 output would need to tab through all the navigation items before arriving at the main topic content. So starting with this version, HTML5 outputs automatically include a skip to main content option when users open the output and press tab. So after encountering this option, they can press enter then to bypass all those navigation elements and go right to the main content. You can also use the UI text tab in the skin editor or one of the language skins to change the text for several of the new elements related to accessibility, such as the logo tooltip and also that skip to main content label. So for those of you publishing to Zendesk, we added a few additional enhancements in that publishing destination field, including the ability to publish to brands. Excuse me, so in a subdomain, previously you were limited to just the default subdomain, so publishing to brands is now supported. Again, touched on this briefly when we were looking at that destination setup, but in 2019 R2, we also added new content options which are configurable in the Zendesk publishing destination, including, what group of users on Zendesk are allowed to view that published content, and also additional management permissions to control who can edit and publish that content in Zendesk. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is support for Frame 2019. So if you've got any FrameMaker 2019 files that you would like to import into into Flare, then those files are supported as well. Now again, one other thing, in February we released the MadCap Authoring and Management System, or AMS for short, which is a complete solution supporting the entire content development lifecycle. And AMS includes all of these things that we see here: Flare, Central with additional SME seats, additional storage, all of the desktop tools, including the 2 connectors, MadCap Connect for Salesforce and MadCap Connect for Zendesk. So many of the things we talked about are included in AMS. So it's a great way to get all of these as a low price subscription. And if you have any questions about this, please contact us in sales or call your rep, because we can certainly talk about what this is, what the pricing is, and perhaps it's a better option for you. And we can certainly go through it. Last thing, MadWorld has been announced. It's going to be in Austin, Texas next year, September 20th through the 23rd. Early registration is now open. You can save up to $1,600 on registering. If you go to our website and click on the MadWorld banner, you can actually get that early bird registration now. It's a great way to save on that registration if you plan on coming. The schedule is going to be coming soon. In fact, we have our call for papers coming in December. So if you're interested in submitting a presentation for MadWorld, we'd love to hear from you. Do look for an email from us on that sometime in early December. But again, wonderful chance to save a lot of money on that registration. So I'd encourage you to pop up and to our website and check out those discounts that we have now. All right, so a couple minutes for questions here. I'm just going to go ahead and open this up. And let me go ahead and switch my slide. Hopefully y'all can see that now. We don't have time to go through all of the questions. You all have some great questions in here, and we're going to go ahead and send a follow-up. But I'm just flagged a few that came up a couple times that I thought would be useful to cover. Okay, just let me look here. So a couple questions came up when Gio was talking about CSS variables. I don't know if you want to take this, Gio, in terms of support for those different mediums. I know that came up a couple times. What if you've got different properties for print or mobile or online?
Yeah, so we do support mediums and the ability to change those values within the CSS editor as well for your variables. So they could be different for your print mediums, they could be different for your mobile mediums and tablet mediums.
Great. Another question is, when you were talking about the drag and drop, you know, can we also copy and paste? Yes, copy and paste is supported. You can do that too, but the drag and drop is really easy, and so I would try that out because it does make things a little bit more simple. Let me see. I think there were some other questions here that came up a few times. Feel free to take one, Gio, if you see one that's coming up more than once. I thought that would be a good thing to do in the last few minutes.
Right. I see a question here that came up a couple of times. Is it possible to download those reports and analytics from Central? If so, in what format? And yes, so analytics can be downloaded into a .csv file format from Central.
Great, yes. Question on the Zendesk publishing came up, so that I'm fully understanding categories and sections. So the question is, the peoples of Middle Earth would be a category, elves would be a section or a folder. So again, I created the table of contents in Flare to map what a Zendesk TOC and how that's structured. So those top level books in your Flare TOC will become Zendesk categories. Any second level book, you know, any sub book beneath that first level one will become a section. And whatever topics you've included into that second level book, those will become articles in Zendesk. So I saw that come up a couple times. I hope that was helpful and more clear. And another question on trialing the connector for Zendesk in Salesforce. So the way it works is it's installed with Flare, but when you open up the destination file in Flare and you actually choose the destination you want, in fact, I'll go there right now and we can do it together. Let me open up a destination here. I'll add one. And I'll just call this Zendesk, for example, because I saw this come up a couple times. So when those connectors are installed, you can choose them from the list, okay? and you'll be prompted to activate. So mine's already activated here, so it's remembering that. But if you haven't done it yet, this will say activate. And when you activate it, that's going to start your 30-day trial of the connectors for both Zendesk and Salesforce Knowledge. I hope that helps. So there was a question on the Microcontent. Can you show how Flare can be used to create embedded help? Well, the short answer to that today is no. You know, if you remember back to that slide that I showed that had all of the uses for Microcontent, again, it's the backbone for a lot of things. Embedded help is one of them. But what we're doing today out of Flare is the ability to create those featured results in our searches, those featured snippet search results. So it's not that you can't do it today, but it's one of those features of Microcontent that would require a little bit more elbow grease, as I like to say, in terms of some programmatic work. So it's not that it can't be done, we just don't have a button for it in Flare yet. But as I mentioned, we're watching this really closely, and we're spending a lot of time on this. And so I hope that chart is going to change a little bit. It would be great to have the ability to have support for embedded help out of the box. So it's not that you can't do it now, because you'll have access to all of that Microcontent in your output files. So if you've got some developer help or some post-build processes you want to include, you certainly could do it. We just don't have a button out of the box for it as of yet. So a lot of the things I showed are currently possible. We're just working on, hopefully in the future, building out support for additional uses of Microcontent in future versions. Okay, I think we have time for one more. Gio, you want to take one?
Yeah, back on the central analytics side of things. What if I publish an internal what if I publish my output to an internal site behind our firewall? Will Central still receive those analytics? And the answer is yes. So as long as your output, even if your output was published internally, as long as you do have connection to the internet, Central can collect those analytics.
Yeah. And that's what makes that feature so flexible, I think. So again, it's such an easy thing to try. And if you haven't already, I would encourage you to get a trial and test. If you did a central trial and it expired and you want to do a new one, just contact us. We can help you out, but would encourage you to try it since it's such an easy way to get those data analytics. So with that, I'm looking at the time. We've certainly gone over, and I just want to thank everybody for attending. We have some great questions here that we didn't get to live, but we're going to send a follow-up document for everybody so that you can review. And we'll also send a link to the recording once it registers. So I want to thank everybody so much for sticking with us for this last 90 minutes, and thank you for all your amazing questions. They were great. And we certainly look forward to talking to you in the next webinar, and reach out to us. Once again, if you have any questions, we'd be happy to help. So thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of the week.